Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Know-How is brought to you by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
Why helicopters crash.
We're taking you back to Maker Faire.
Your questions, our answers.
And the first part of the Know-How 250. Welcome to Know-How. It's the Twitch show where we Kung Fury. I'm Father Robert Ballecer.
Yeah, Bryan Burnett.
And for the next 40, 50...
Till Alex tells us to stop.
Until Alex tells us we need to stop, we're going to be taking you through some of the projects that we've been geeking out to over the last couple of weeks so that you can take them home and geek out yourself.
Yeah, and so this was probably a pretty geeky weekend for you because we're going to be talking about why helicopters crash.
Why helicopters? Well, okay. That was kind of a clickbait type thing.
Yeah.
What we really want to talk about is a really big hazard to any rotary wing craft. So
and we have experience with rotary wing craft.
Yes, yeah. Yes. Our quadcopters are rotary wing. So when you think about a standard airliner, the wing is static. And you have something that develops thrust, pushes you forward, and you develop lift off of that airfoil, right?
Right.
In a rotary wing craft, like a quadcopter or a real helicopter, or even something like the V-22, the tilt rotor, the wing actually moves. It rotates to generate lift, right?
Yep. It's a propeller.
Yes. There is a thing that is the bane of every rotary wing pilot. No matter if you're a helicopter pilot, a quadcopter pilot, or a pilot of a V-22. And that's something that we call the Vortex ring state.
And I feel like there's a very good picture of it behind you.
There's a horrible picture that I drew that people mocked.
What?
Okay.
Why would you ever mock that flower with stinky lines on it?
What looks like a dragonfly dropping stuff to the ground is not actually that. This is a representation of what a rotary wing looks like. So imagine that this is spinning around, right? What you have is as these surfaces cut through the air, they're forcing air down, it's developing thrust. Lift, right? That's we've talked about this before. Well, that works really, really well as long as you've got this nice airfoil shape. But you'll notice as you get closer to the hub and the parts that actually grip the blades, you no longer have that airfoil shape. So there's this sort of empty space in the middle where it's not developing any thrust. There's nothing being pushed down.
And there's not really a way around that either. That's just the physics of the
exactly.
the whole
You can't,
system.
because that's the part that's rotating. You can't have an airfoil there. Well, the problem is that dead space actually creates this sort of current, this eddy, where you get an updraft in the middle. Now, normally that doesn't matter because if you're piloting a rotary wing craft, something like a helicopter, you're typically moving. And as you move, that updraft just gets left behind.
Okay.
Okay? Problem is, one of the things that rotary craft can do is they can hover or they can descend straight into their own prop wash.
Or when you have to land,
Exactly. The problem with that is as you do that, that zone, this thing right here, actually starts to spread out. It gets bigger and bigger. As you descend into your own prop wash, you're creating more and more of this area where you're not developing lift. If it engulfs all of the rotors, all the way to the ends, you enter what's called a vortex ring state.
Or I've heard it called like dirty air or something
Dirty
like that.
air, yeah. And you see it all the time. You've seen this. When you're piloting your quadcopter and you try to come straight down, it starts to do this, right?
Yeah, especially if it's not balanced well either.
If it's not balanced, you'll get a lot of vibration. And that's because you're losing lift. Now, a lot of people will panic, and what they'll do is they'll goose the throttle. Because you're thinking, well, if I'm losing lift, add more thrust. The problem is, if you're in a vortex ring state and you add thrust, you just make it worse.
So what do you do to get out of it then?
It's very simple. All you have to do, if you're descending and you're in a vortex ring state, move it a tiny bit forward.
Oh, until you get to a clean space,
Exactly, and that's what helicopter pilots have been trained to do. That's what we've seen. If you've seen those phenomenal crashes with the V-22, the Osprey, the thing that can tilt its motors up and down.
The murder machine?
The murder machine. They had to retrain their pilots to not goose the throttle. They said if you start to lose lift, if you start to drop out, just edge it forward, like a foot.
And
you'll exit the VRS.
Because that seems like it would be a very natural reaction, is to just give it more throttle. You're starting to go down. Give it more throttle. Yeah.
And the problem is, you don't always enter VRS. You're not always in the vortex ring state when you're coming down. So sometimes goosing the throttle will help. In fact, that's how you land. If you've been flying around a quadcopter, as you come down, right before you hit the ground, you kind of goose the throttle so that you flare out and kind of land easily.
Give yourself a little cushion.
Exactly, so that will work. But if you're in that vortex ring state and you goose the throttle, you'll actually drop faster, which is kind of scary.
Yeah, definitely, especially if you're
in it.
Actually, inside of the craft.
If it's a full-size helicopter, you're not just going, oh man, I broke the arm. It's, I broke my arm or killed myself. That's not good. Yeah. Now, there's a couple other things that we do want to talk about with rotary wing craft, because we've had quite a few questions about, why does my quadcopter fly strange? Why is it that I have it hovering and it gets hit by a breeze and suddenly it starts rising all on its own?
Right.
Well, you just have to look at the aerodynamics of a rotary wing craft. This is essentially a huge sail area. When these props are spinning, even if it's stationary, if it gets hit by a gust of wind, it's going to treat it like a sail, and that sail could just make it rise. It will rise on a gust of wind. It will drop on a gust of wind.
Okay, yeah, because we've been getting comments of people saying, like, well, I see people hovering their quads, and I can't get mine to just hover. But I think some of those quads also have programs accounting for everything, right? Like there's DJIs that they can have just be stationary, but you're not like in full manual mode.
Right, and actually some of the more advanced flight controllers are now copying some of the software that you get in full-size helicopters, and the new update that they pushed out to the V-22, which will look for a vortex ring state, and it will automatically just move it out of the VRS area. And so if you get that on one of the more advanced quadcopters, it can avoid it for you. There's someone, I think it's Titus, who is also Dirty Air in the chat room.
Dirty Air Titus?
Well, he was talking about how, like, remember I showed you that frame that would angle the motors outwards, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's actually a really good way to avoid it altogether, because you're never descending into your own prop wash. The prop wash is always going off to the side.
Isn't it the DJI Inspire, or the really nice one that has the arms that go up and they kind of angle out?
They're a little bit angled out, right? It just gives you that much nicer descent, because anyone who has flown will tell you descent is hard. Going up's easy.
Yeah.
But when you descend, it starts to get bumpy.
Yeah.
Well, in a standard quadcopter, all you'd have to do is move out of there. I never go straight down. I try to like circle around the landing.
Do a little landing, yeah.
Right. It makes it much smoother, and yeah. So that's a lesson we can take from full-size rotary wing craft and apply it to our hobby.
And just don't panic, goose it.
Don't panic. Don't goose. Although it is kind of fun to punch out and you just hit the throttle and just watch it like fly up.
It's fun to yell out goose too. No, goose!
We actually have footage of you flying around. We should. Yeah, well, that's right.
Flying around what?
We flew around with the low probe folks.
Oh yeah. Where we got a group together and it was kind of actually a little scary.
It was a little scary.
It was a lot of fun, but when you have about 5 or 6 people all flying quads around you, you just have to trust.
Especially since we had the monster quad. We had a hexacopter.
Yeah.
It was a really nice one with the gimbal, the 3-axis gimbal. Then we had a bunch of FPV folks with everything from like the tiny little one to
that one was
like
fun.
a 250 class, and he was screaming. He was a good pilot.
You could hear it buzzing, and I feel like he was messing with it.
That was the hardest part, because I'm trying to concentrate on keeping my craft in the air, and I'm hearing zoom, and it feels like it's 2 inches behind my head. I'm like, nope, not gonna
And
look.
he was crashing it everywhere too.
I have never seen that much crashing in one session.
It seemed like it was a pretty strong frame though.
Yeah.
Like it was built to crash.
Yeah. All right, well, folks, that's all we've got for Dirty Air. What we wanted to do now is we wanted to take you back to Maker Faire. We actually spoke with a booth at Maker Faire at the Atmel Pavilion. So this is the company that provides a lot of the chips that are being used in things from Arduinos to flight controllers. Essentially, if you are programming on an embedded device, there's a good chance, I'd say 50-50, that you're programming in an Atmel chip. Well, this company called Zymbit wants to take your project and give it a professional polish and perhaps turn it into a real product. So without further ado, let's take you back to Maker Faire 2015. If you're a maker, you've probably been playing around with the Arduino, maybe an Arduino Uno, maybe a Leonardo, something that allows you to fast prototype your ideas into something that does something. That's the whole spirit of maker. But what happens when you want to move that idea past that fast prototype stage into something that you could actually ship and support? Well, that's why we're at Zymbit talking about this. Now, this is, well, what is it?
Right, so this is a platform that allows makers and people who have maker projects to turn an idea that has 1 or 2 into 5 or 10 or 50. You build 1, that's great. You build 2, that's great. But what happens if you want to build 50? That gets very difficult. So Zymbit solves that problem. Zymbit solves that problem by providing a motherboard, case, user interface, and also cloud services to go along with that to take care of device deployment, device management, remote debugging, and all these other features. So that makers can very quickly turn their bag of bits with bunches of wires that are sticking out and going everywhere into something that is professional, good-looking, spouse-approved, girlfriend-approved, boss-approved.
This is something that's important. We've talked about this on our show before, which is taking something that may work into something that actually looks good. It's something that I can package. It's something that I could ship to a friend or ship 1,000 to sale. Now, what have you done with your platform? What's the special sauce, the unique features that you think will take someone who's looking at doing a fast prototype into doing fast production?
That's right. So today we have 3 products. That we have Zymbit Orange, which is a motherboard with an Arduino Zero compatible capability on it. It's an Arduino Zero compatible CPU. We take care of the power supplies. And there's a supervisor CPU on it that takes care of everything, bringing it together, working with different voltages, making sure all the boards are powered up, powered down. In addition to it, we have security. There's also another product, Zymbit Iris, which is this touch-sensitive cover with multiple displays. This is open user programmable. They could do whatever they want with it. It has touch, and it also has security in it as well. And then there are cloud services, as I've mentioned, that take care of managing these things. And what we do is we bring it all together. So this is the difficult part. It's the 95% that nobody wants to do. It's the stuff that takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of time, takes maybe tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars to get it out there. And with this, you can do it in weeks, not in months or years.
Now, if they wanted to find out more about what you can do for their products, for their prototypes, for their projects, where can they go?
Right, so first of all, they can go to Zymbit.com. We also have a competition running for best designs, for best ideas that we will support, and we will give away free Zymbit hardware. So please go and sign up. Also Twitter at Zymbit. Please sign up. We'll be announcing more exciting features.
Alex, thank you very much for speaking with us, and thank you for showing off the next step for makers. Now, if your prototype still has wires hanging off the side, if it looks like it was thrown together with a Lego kit, maybe you need some Zymbit. I kind of like that project look. I like having the wires hanging out.
Yeah.
It tells people I built this, but yeah, I mean, if you're going to actually turn it into something that other people will use, you probably want to clean it up a little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of like those goggles, the FPV goggles that we put together. Sure, it gives you some legitimacy, like that you're a maker, but when wires are hanging off of it and stuff, it's kind of hard to pretend like you're being professional.
In that instance, I think we've both come to the realization that we're never going to look cool flying our quadcopters.
I think we accepted that a long time ago.
Right. But it doesn't mean you don't have to look cool when you're making. Now it's time for your questions or answers. Hey, Bryan, who's the first one from?
So this comes from Michael Renard. Hi all, I would like to use my OpenDNS on my router, WRT 1900 AC. I can't seem to find where you replace the DNS settings. Does anyone know how to do it? Also, would it be better to use DDWRT instead?
I believe it's Michel Reynard.
Very well could be.
Michael,
I'm sorry.
Michael Reynard, that works for us too. Okay, so first of all, we can't specifically tell you where you put in the third-party DNS settings because it's going to vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. Typically, you're going to find it in network and basic settings. What you're looking for is DHCP. The DHCP settings will tell your router what settings to give the clients that try to connect to it. Now, the thing about that is, again, that will differ from manufacturer to manufacturer, but in order for you to understand what it's doing, I thought your question might be a good entree into talking about DHCP.
And that stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol.
Exactly.
I totally knew that off the top of my head.
You totally did.
Yeah.
No, I saw that. I saw that.
As my eyes are looking over at the screen over here.
Now, DHCP is something that everyone of your generation just took for granted, right?
Yeah, definitely.
You plug in a computer, you connect to the wireless, and it works. It didn't used to be like that.
You used to have to like manually get in there, get your hands dirty?
Exactly. You had to get your hands dirty. We had to do what we call now static addressing. So for example, if I had a gateway at 192.168.0.1, I would have to go to each and every single computer in my network and I'd have to say, you are 192.168.0.2, 192.168.0.3, so on and so forth. And I'd have to put the subnet mask, and I'd have to put the default gateway, and I'd have to put the DNS entries. It wasn't a lot of work. But I mean, if you had a big network, that could be a pain in the butt. And the worst part was, if something changed in the network, you'd have to go and change everything.
Okay. So you had to go on the individual computers to set that?
Yes.
Oof.
Yeah. And in fact, we even had like management tools that would allow you to do it remotely. But the worst part about that is, if you accidentally horked one of the machines with the remote management, then you'd have to get up and like go over there.
Physically go.
Yeah, I mean, if it's like the same floor, it's great. But some of these networks that I was running, I mean, they would span cities. So that wasn't always fun.
No. I've had enough trouble setting a static IP for certain machines on my network.
Exactly. Imagine if you had to do that for every device. And remember, this is not just like computers. This was printers. This was any network device, Ethernet device that you might connect. It was a pain. It was not fun. Which is why they created DHCP. DHCP was a way to get rid of that workload. Instead of you going from machine to machine, device to device, and entering in the settings, it was a protocol. It was an agreement, a way for a client to request the server give it an address that isn't being used in the network, and then it would automatically configure itself.
Okay, that sounds nice.
Yeah, nice. And there's only four parts. And it's actually important that people know the parts, because if you ever have a problem with your DHCP server, it's good to understand how it works. Everything starts with this thing called discovery. There's actually it would be DHCP discover. If you were looking at like through Wireshark, we've shown off Wireshark on the show before.
Right.
If you were looking at Wireshark, you'd see when you first connect a computer into the network, it sends out a DHCP discover packet. Now, this is broadcast over UDP. Now, you may not remember, we had a conversation about TCP versus UDP. TCP is stateful, which means it handshakes, it makes a connection, it maintains the connection, right? So this computer is talking to this computer, and you're good.
Right, that's called a handshake.
That's a TCP connection.
Okay.
UDP is just like me standing in the center of a room going, hey! Hey! Hey!
Anyone hear me?
It's a connectionless communication method. There is no handshake.
Okay.
It's just me broadcasting packets over the network. In the case of the client, it's going to broadcast a packet to 255.255.255.255.
And that's the subnet mask?
It's called what's called a broadcast packet. It's going to hit everything on the network. Which is why when you first plug in a computer, if you're looking at like the activity lights on your switch, you'll see them all briefly flash. It's because it's sending this discovery packet to everybody. It's saying, hey, I'm here. I would like to get an IP address. And it may even ask, have I been here before? Can I get the address I had before?
Oh, okay.
So that's going to be picked up by the server. When the server hears that, it's going to broadcast back into the network with what's called a DHCP offer. And the offer says, okay, well, I have an open space at 192.168.0.63.
Right.
And it's going to also include, well, and the gateway is this, so this is how you know to get back to me, and the DNS servers are this.
And then the client accepts the offer or declines the offer or something?
Correct. So it goes back to the client. Now the client will send in what's like an official request. It's going to say, okay, I got your information. 192.168.0.63, this gateway, this DNS. If the client's okay with it, it will then send a DHCP request. So we go from discovery to offer to request. That request is going to get back to the server, and the server will do what's called a DHCP acknowledge, or an ACK. And the acknowledgement is saying, okay, good, that information I gave you, you seem to be okay with it. I've now taken that out of the table so that everyone knows that they can't take that address. It belongs to you. But it will also give a lease time. It will say, you own this for an hour, and then you have to re-request, or you own it for 20 hours, or you own it forever.
And that's something you can set in your router settings?
Correct. I typically keep it like 24 hours.
24 hours?
But if you're going to have a lot of devices, you lower that because you'll quickly fill up your table with a lot of inactive devices.
Right. And then when do you start getting IP conflicts? When you're just plugging a bunch of different devices all at the same time? Or?
You can. So you can get IP conflicts in a couple of different ways. One is if you have a really long lease time. Let's say I set a 24-hour lease time.
Right.
And a device disconnects. Well, maybe the DHCP server doesn't actually keep that 24-hour lease times. It sees that that device is not active, and it releases that address to another device. When you reconnect that device, it's going to say, well, I was here before. I'm just going to use the same address, and now you've got them both on the same IP.
Okay.
Or if you set a static IP inside the DHCP range, because remember, in your router, normally it tells you, my DHCP range will be 192.168.0.100 to 200, and it will only hand out that 100 addresses.
Okay.
Correct?
Can you set a static IP outside of that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's recommended?
You can, you never, ever, don't set statics inside your DHCP range.
I think I know why I've been running into some issues.
Hey, we fix things here on Know-How.
I learned something today. Yeah.
Right. So, like on a router, a home router, like, what's your router's address?
It's 192.168.1.1.
1.1. So you're going to have .1.1 all the way to .1.254.
Yeah.
What I would typically do is I would say, okay, my DHCP range is going to be from .10 to 100. And anything I do statics is going to be above that.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I should have done. I think what I had done is my Xbox automatically detected the settings, so it must have done the handshake stuff, and it said, okay, I think it was like .10. Yeah.
And then you set it statically for that.
And I set it statically for .10. And then so I think I turned it off at one point, and something else took that IP.
Yeah, that's
and then
how it
I was
works.
just having IP conflicts. Yeah.
Yeah, because when your Xbox turns back on, it's going to say, oh,
like, hey,
I got .10. I'll just use that, right? Because you set it for me.
It was gone.
It's gone.
Okay.
Okay, now you know.
I learned.
There you go. One of the other parts of the question was whether or not he should use DDWRT. He's got a Linksys, I think it's an WRT 1900 AC.
Yeah.
Very nice router. Unfortunately, it doesn't yet support DDWRT. However, there is good news. Alex, if you go to that link there, on the DDWRT website, just about a week ago, they finally said, look, we're working with the people from Linksys. They've been very supportive. We're going to get you an official DDWRT. In fact, we've got a DDWRT 1900 AC downstairs.
Is that the one that it looks like a big spider kind of thing?
It is a great router, but
it looks cool.
It looks very cool, but I haven't wanted to review it or use it until I've got DDWRT or
Because wasn't that one of the
working.
promises of that router was that they were going to have open source software for everything?
Yeah, it was supposed to be a throwback to the old WRT line.
Yeah.
Remember the original?
Because it looks retro.
Yeah, it's like that. It's supposed to be an homage to the WRT54G. That's the very first one that people started installing custom firmware on.
Right.
And they said, well, we're going to do that, but we're going to give you a lot of horsepower and a lot of memory so you could do anything you want.
Right.
But we've been sitting on that thing for over a year.
I saw
waiting.
it. No joke. Yesterday I saw it in the basement, and I thought, Padre's not using this. I might need to take this home.
It's a great router. It really is.
Well, I had asked you because I was having router issues. I was like, do you recommend this router? And you're like, I like it, but I can't recommend it because they promised this open source software, and they just haven't backed it up.
I was really bummed out about that because once they get that support for DDWRT, we are going to have so much fun with that because it has so many capabilities.
So you're saying don't take it out of the basement yet?
No, it's down there.
I wanted to take it home.
Stop taking all our stuff.
Fine.
All right. Let's go on to the next question.
All right, so we got TPTWK. I'm guessing that's a handle, not a name. Old computer, new drive. I have an old ZT desktop computer I purchased from Costco 6 years ago. It came with Vista, installed, but included a free Win 7 upgrade disk, which I am running now. It has recently slowed down significantly. I'm preparing to wipe the hard drive back to factory settings, but I have noticed the hard drive is getting very loud. That is not a good sign.
Nope.
I was wondering if I should replace or upgrade the hard drive or not bother to do just the wipe. He found blues and green Western Digital hard drives, which we've talked about before, on Amazon for about $50, and he just needs to know what the difference are.
Yeah.
And any tutorials about installing.
Okay, first of all, very good on noticing that your hard drive has gotten loud. That's actually it's a really good sign.
Yeah, you're gonna want to back up right now, right? Like if you're using that computer to watch this right now, you should probably be backing that up.
If it's getting loud, it means the bearing is starting to go. And if the bearing starts to go, you're going to get track misalignments, the motor's going to heat up, and eventually that thing will just shut down.
I've had a hard drive that started clicking, and I could feel my heart sink.
Exactly.
Like, no.
Yeah, you don't want to get to that point. And the nice thing is the prices of hard drives have really, really come down.
Right.
But let's talk about your choice. So you wanted to know the difference between a Western Digital green and a Western Digital blue. Now, there are a couple of different ones. There's Western Digital blacks, reds, purples, blues, and greens.
Was it purple?
Yeah, it's like recreational drugs.
Well, the rainbow of hard drives.
The blacks are the fastest. We
That's
both
the one
like
I
those.
use, yeah.
If you're going to use a lot of storage-intensive software, or if you have a lot of data that you need to pull off very quickly, the black is the way to go. It's our drive of choice. We love it. The reds you only use in NASs. They've been optimized for NASs. They don't work well alone because they remove a level of error checking, which is what makes them so good for NASs. Because the NAS does the error checking, the drive doesn't. You go to the purple. The purple are AV drives. So they work really well with sequential data. So if you've got a large video file, purples are great. If you have a lot of random rewrite access, no good.
Okay.
No good at all. So if you're going to use it as for like a DVR or a network video recorder, that's where you would use a purple.
Okay.
The greens are
low power,
low
heat.
efficient, economical, but also slow. They rotate at 5,400 RPM. They generate a lot less heat, We use them here for backup drives. They are great for backup drives. The blue series is what you would consider the average desktop hard drive.
Okay.
Yeah, so 7,200 RPM.
Kind of in the middle of everything? Or?
Right, so it's somewhere between the green and the black.
Okay.
Yeah. So the red and the purple are very specialized drives. Just look at performance. You go from green to blue to black.
Okay, and this is kind of an older machine, so blue is probably what you'd recommend, right?
I would recommend a blue, but more than that, I would recommend this. So go with an SSD. If you're gonna do this.
You're SSD crazy.
I am. I mean, seriously, even on a 6-year-old machine, you will get such a kick in the performance pants from going with an SSD.
That's true, but
it's unbelievable.
If it's a 6-year-old Costco computer, what is it using SATA?
Yeah, it will use SATA, but that's the other thing. You will not get the full benefit of something like these drives. These drives are designed for a SATA revision 3, which your computer probably does not have. It will run perfectly well on these. So if you're planning to eventually upgrade to a new desktop, grab one of these because this is the newest one. This is the Savage. This goes for about what, $109 for a 240 gigabyte, or you could get the version that's slightly older, the KC300, which I think you can get for like $75 or $80 for 240 gigabyte. Very reliable drives, very fast, and when you get the new machine, you can port them over.
That's true.
What I would do is I would get this for your operating system drive and then get yourself a green for backing up all that data. Just get it off that old hard drive as fast as possible because it's about to go.
Yeah, I'd say that's a good recommendation. That's what I would do.
Yeah. But I mean, people will say, "Oh, it's an old computer. Why put an SSD?" Because it is an old computer. That's why I would recommend an SSD. Because seriously, cost per performance, nothing compares.
That's the biggest difference you can make to any computer that you own. If it doesn't have an SSD, put one in it.
Exactly. Actually, so Travis DH1 is saying the people that he knows say WD greens perform just about as well as tape. That's exactly what we use them for. In fact, Mr. Director, we have a big box of greens that you use just to back up our stuff, right?
We did at the cottage.
We did it. Oh.
So what are we doing now?
I think we just delete them.
Yeah, I just forget about them.
We generate so much stuff now, they're like, no, we don't. No.
Yeah, we've seen the quality of the content. We don't need to save it.
Let's go ahead and go to the next question.
All right, this comes from Brian B. Brian with an I, though.
Yeah, no.
And the B, I don't know, it's
Almost
not
as
Burnett. I'm certainly not submitting my own questions onto does anyone here have any experience with Ruckus? I'm guessing he's not talking about the little Honda scooter. Access points and beamflex technology. I am looking for a solution for a residential use case, heavy with Wi-Fi traffic, typical, including mobile devices, security, or VoIP, and IoT. Is the premium for a Ruckus device warranted for an advanced residential deployment?
So, does anyone have experience with Ruckus? I don't know. Maybe this one right here?
Where did that come from?
Okay, I used to like the, what was the name of them? The Xeris arrays. Those are the ones with directional antennas.
Yeah, that's right. It looked like a big saucer.
Looked like a big saucer. Not so great for a residential installation. I mean, they're great for stadiums and open spaces. Ruckus is my go-to brand for when I want to make a house work properly. I mean, they are designed as enterprise APs. They work incredibly well as enterprise APs, but there is nothing like a Ruckus in your house. If you have been having any sort of Wi-Fi issues, if you lose connectivity just randomly, if your AP tips over, a Ruckus absolutely is worth the premium. But let me say...
What's the premium? Is it a lot? What, 500? Oof.
Yeah,
man.
Okay. So it's steep. It is definitely steep. I mean, considering the fact that you could buy like an AC router for $100 to $200, $500 for just the AP is a lot of cash. But what this does is this does an exceptionally good job at having clean RF, at having really, really well done beamforming and MIMO. That's multiple in, multiple out.
So I don't have any experience using the Ruckus. Clearly, I would love to. But I know Patrick Norton has come on the Screensavers and talked about Ruckus. And I think Kevin Rose, when he came on, same thing.
House,
yeah.
Right.
So
if you can afford them, there's
that's
nothing
the way to
like
go.
a Ruckus. It really is. So let's explain some of the technologies. One is beamforming.
Yeah.
So in the Xeris arrays that I like, it actually used a physical antenna
I remember that.
to segment off the 360 degrees.
They're pointed everywhere.
Right. So you have radios all around the periphery of what looks like a flying saucer, and each of them is responsible for a very narrow azimuth of RF. Right.
So how does the Ruckus do it then?
Ruckus uses a different technology. There's no physical antenna. It uses what's called creative interference. So if you have two...
Creative interference?
It's creative interference.
I feel like that's the title, like the show.
Know-how will now be known
as creative interference.
So it uses two antennas, and as it sends out signals, right, from the two antennas.
Okay.
But it can put them out of phase slightly, which will essentially go from being just two beacons of energy to being a focused beam.
Okay. So it's like a laser.
Yeah, well, it's like an RF laser. Yeah, basically. Yeah, you're using the propagation of RF waves and the way that they interact with one another to sort of cancel out the energy everywhere except where you want it to go.
That's cool.
It's very cool. It works, and actually, Ruckus is one of the first manufacturers to actually do it well. There are some other companies that say they do beamforming. It's really.
With like a big sticker on the side of it. Beamforming. Yeah.
No. A lot of those companies, all they do is they just pump out a lot of power. Well, if you pump out a lot of power, what happens is you just get dirty RF. Ruckus uses a minimal amount of power. It uses beamforming, and it also uses what's called MIMO, multiple in, multiple out, which means it can recombine signals. So as I've got signals coming back from my laptop, right, they're going to be bouncing off of walls, off of windows. The Ruckus is actually intelligent enough to be able to recombine those and turn it into something coherent.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
$500, but it's an investment, right?
It is an investment.
You won't have to replace it for a long time, right?
But I mean, okay. So here's the thing. I like it, but I didn't have to pay for this. Okay. I mean, I have 5 of these in my place. I had to pay for none of them.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess
have to send them back eventually.
you won't be so upset if this disappears,
that's my
right?
practice unit.
Practice unit.
So the reason why I have them is because the school I'm living at it actually is evaluating this, and so Ruckus sent us a bunch of units to see if it'll work at the school. It is perfect. We are going to be deploying them all over our school. But yeah, $500.
That's rough. But you know, when you live in an apartment building or somewhere where there's a lot of interfering Wi-Fi signals, there's not a lot of options at that point.
So if you're at your last rope, right? You can't take it anymore. Grab a Ruckus. In fact, if you go over to the Ruckus website, I think they actually have they used to have this. They had a trial program where they would like send you one to try it.
Nice.
I mean, they want your credit card, so if you
anymore.
don't send it back, they can charge you. But you know,
at least you could test it out.
Exactly. So give the next generation of Wi-Fi a chance. Bryan B. Ruckus is, in my mind, absolutely worth it. But I don't have $500.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I feel like if I did have them send me one to test,
you might not.
I would just get hooked. And
I think they count on that. All right, folks. Now we did promise you that we were going to be doing a Know-How 250. In fact, we last talked about it like a month ago. We wanted to wait enough time for people to actually get the parts from Ready to Fly Quads and wherever else. Now, we also did want to say that this is a more advanced build. This is not like the 450 or the 250 that we did a long time ago. Those were basic beginner builds. We're now assuming that you have certain pieces of gear with you that you're going to have.
You've honed your flying skills?
You've honed your flying skills, which means you've got a transmitter, you've got a battery charger, you probably have a battery plant, a couple of different batteries that you can use.
Yeah.
You probably have a lot of the support equipment, which is why we didn't include that in the parts list. But with all those disclaimers out of the way, hey Alex, what do you say we go ahead and start to show them how to build the Know-How 250? To complete our build, you'll need 4 2204 or 2208 2300 kV motors or better, 4 30-amp ESCs, a 250 or 260 class frame with an extension body, a flip MWC flight controller, 45mm power distribution board, 20 pairs of 3.5mm bullets, 1 foot of red 14-gauge silicone wire, 1 foot of black 14-gauge silicone wire, 1 pair of XT60 connectors, 1 full set of 5x3x3 props, 1 set of radio and receiver leads, 1 box of nylon standoffs, 4 M3 12mm screws, and 1 3S or 4S 1000 mAh to 2200 mAh LiPo battery, 20 to 60C discharge. You'll also need 1 soldering kit, 1 pair of helping hands, 1 pair of wire strippers and cutters, 1 tube of Loctite blue, 1 foot of 3/16" heat shrink tubing, 1 jar of zip ties, 1 screwdriver set, and 1 strip of self-adhesive Velcro. The first step is to solder bullets onto our motors. We're using RTFQ 2204 series cans and 30-amp ESCs for our build. Start by cutting down your motor leads to just over 3 inches from the can, then stripping 4mm of insulation from each wire, tinning your leads. Solder male connectors onto the ends of each of the motor's 3 wires by filling the mounting cups halfway with solder, inserting the lead, reflowing the solder on the wire, and allowing it to cool. Check the solder joints to make sure that you have a solid connection to the bullet. Repeat for all 12 leads, then insulate each bullet with a 1/2 inch piece of 3/16" heat shrink tubing that covers everything from the base of the bullet back. With the soldering and insulation complete, it's time to mount the motors on the frame. We're using a Diatone 250 glass fiber frame with an extension kit. Orient the frame so that the cutout shelf is forward, then make a note of the arm numbering. Front left is number 1, front right is number 2, rear right is number 3, rear left is number 4. Your Diatone kit comes with an abundance of M3 8mm screws. Using 16 of them to attach the motors to each arm, 4 per motor, make sure to angle the wiring harness towards the center of the frame. Dab the ends of each screw into Loctite glue to make sure it doesn't vibrate loose, and be sure to use 8mm screws. Anything shorter may not secure the motor, and anything longer runs the risk of making contact with the windings, destroying the motor. With the motors mounted, attach the 4 landing feet to the bottom of each arm. You want them on now before we start wiring the motors and ESCs so you don't accidentally thread wires through a landing mount. Once in, use a pair of small zip ties to secure the landing gear onto the arms. We're using a set of Ready to Fly Quad Red Series 30-amp ESCs with battery eliminator circuits.
We could get away with using 20 amp ESCs, but one of the things we want in the Know-How 250 is future expandability. Using 30 amp units doesn't add any weight or expense, and they can be repurposed for larger projects in the future. We're going to mount our ESCs on the lower surface of each arm. Cut each of the 3 motor leads 1.5 inches from the end of the ESC, then strip and tin the leads. Solder them into female 3.5mm connectors, again by half-filling the mounting cups, then reflowing the solder. Check your work, then insulate the bullet with 3/16-inch heat shrink tubing. The power leads of each ESC should already be stripped and tinned, and we can leave them at their original length. Solder each end into a male 3.5mm connector and insulate as before. I suggest using red heat shrink tubing for the positive connector and black for the negative. Unlike the motor leads, swapping power leads will destroy electronics. With all your ESC and motor connectors soldered, run your wires down the side of the arm. Notice that there's a small indent in the underside of each arm. This is where your excess wire and connectors will go. Position the ESC over the cables in the indent, then use zip ties to loosely hold the ESCs in place. Make sure that the zip ties loosely bind the ESC to the wires. You don't want them too tight because we're probably going to have to switch a pair or two when we get to testing the electrical system. Repeat the process for all 4 ESCs and motors and check your handiwork for fit. Now let's attach the prop adapters to the motors. Each motor comes with a threaded adapter, a washer, spinner, and the screws needed to mount the adapter. Slip the adapter over the motor shaft, then fasten it to the motor casing with 4 screws, each lightly coated with Loctite blue. Once the adapters are properly fastened, drop a washer onto each motor shaft and fasten a spinner to complete the motor assembly. The next step is to make a power distribution harness to connect the ESCs to the KH250's power source, starting with a 45mm power distribution board. The traces on the board will distribute power from the positive and negative leads on the inside of the board to devices that are connected to the positive and negative leads on the outside of the board. The board comes with soldering points for 8 ESCs and 3 peripherals, but we're only going to use the 4 sets of points towards the left and right of the board. Cut 8 1-inch lengths of 14-gauge silicone wire, 4 black and 4 red. These will become the leads that go from the distribution board to the power leads on the ESCs. Also cut a pair of 5-inch lengths of 14-gauge silicone. These will become the wires that connect the power distribution board to the battery. Strip 4mm of insulation off each end of the 1-inch wires and tin each end. Solder a 3.5mm bullet connector to the end of each wire, then check and insulate each connector as you did with the ESC motor leads. We're going to be wiring an XT60 connector to the power distribution board with the pair of 5-inch wires. Strip 4mm off of one end and 10mm off the other, then tin your wires. We want to wire the female XT60 connector to our power distribution board, but we need to avoid overheating the connector, which would misalign the pins and destroy the housing. In order to solder safely, plug the female connector into its male counterpart. That will spread the heat and maintain pin position. Take the black wire and insert the 10mm stripped end into the pin on the side of the connector with cut corners. Apply heat to the wire, not the connector, and when the solder on the pre-tinned wire starts to flow, quickly apply solder to the wire and fill the cup. Never spend more than 8 seconds applying heat, and make sure to let the XT60 cool before soldering the other wire. Once your wires are attached, use 3/16-inch heat shrink tubing to insulate the conductors. Now let's assemble the board. Matching red wires to the positive mounts and black wires to the negative, solder the 1-inch leads to the sides of the boards. Then solder the 5-inch leads to the inside contacts. Mount all your wires on the same side of the board. Avoid an excess of solder, but flow enough to make sure that all the joints are solid. Take special care not to bridge any of the contact points with loose solder. With the power distribution board completed, we need to mount it on the frame. Run 4 M3 12mm screws into the 35mm mounting holes on the underside of the frame. Then mount the power distribution board on top and secure it to the screws with 4 plastic standoffs. These standoffs not only hold the power distribution harness in position, but they will also be the mounting point for your MWC Flip flight controller. Connect your ESCs to the power distribution board. I prefer to connect across the board to neaten the appearance of the harness. Just make sure you match lead colors, and you might as well double check to make sure that you've soldered black into negative and red into positive. Take special care to make sure that none of the metal from the bullet connectors is showing in order to prevent shorts when we power up. Now let's assemble the base of our long frame extension kit. This cage will give us the real estate we need to mount cameras, receivers, batteries, FPV transmitters, telemetry, and GPS receivers as we upgrade the KH250. The cage consists of 2 small plates, a large top plate, and 8 aluminum standoffs. Use the included screws to attach 2 aluminum standoffs to the edge of each of the small plates. Use a dab of Loctite glue to make sure that the screws don't vibrate free. Mount each of the small plates on the front and rear shelf of the frame, then fasten a screw through both the frame and the small plate to an aluminum standoff, once again using Loctite glue. You should now have a cage attached to your frame with 8 standoffs, but without the top plate. Leave the top plate and the camera holder for the moment. We'll need to access the innards of the craft when we start testing the electronics, which we'll do in the next episode of Project KH250.
Did you like that fade to black and white?
That was very moody.
Very
yeah,
artistic.
it was.
Dark.
Really pulled me in.
Emo. Now, so we are the mechanical assembly of the quadcopter is pretty much done.
Yeah.
What we need to do is we need to add the flight controller. But remember, I asked for the folks to buy the flight controller in its bare kit mode, which means we need to solder in all the pins. We're going to play with the firmware a little bit. But we showed off this flight controller way back when we first started playing with quads. It's the one that can give you telemetry back.
The Arduino-based one?
They're all based on Atmel chipsets. But this is the Flip MWC, which means we're going to be using this to do acrobatics.
Nice.
Yeah. So in the next episode, I'm going to show you how to solder together the controller, make sure that it's working properly. We're going to calibrate it, get it all wired up, and then the episode after that, we're actually going to take to the air.
I'm really glad your favorite part is building them, because I like flying them. Yeah, and then I break them, yes, eventually.
But remember, the whole idea of doing this frame is because we are using this as our platform. We're going to be adding FPV. We're going to be adding telemetry. We're going to be doing some crazy acrobatics with this. So we wanted a foundation, a frame that we could do all of that with, which is why you need this extension board, because on the base 250 diatone kit, there's just not the real estate you need to put all the gear you want to put.
Yeah, where are you going to hide the battery on that?
The battery on this actually goes right down in the middle.
Hang on the bottom?
Yeah,
okay.
Straight down on the middle. Or some people will actually put it up at the top, but I want to reserve the top for all the antennas I'm going to have. So there's going to be an FPV antenna, there's going to be a GPS antenna, and then there's probably going to be an FPV camera in addition to like the GoPro. So I want to protect the GoPro inside the cage, and I'll put an FPV camera on top, because what I want to do is I want to use this. This is something that this did not go on the know-how budget. This went on the Padre budget.
That looks nice.
This is the Sun Sky. I can't remember the name of this. I was looking around for what I was going to spend my hard-earned cash on.
Yeah.
This is a Sky Zone FPV goggle set. That look cool, right?
Just from the look of it, it's money well spent.
It's money.
Yeah.
This is totally money. Well, there's a couple of cool things about this. First of all, it's got some of the features of the really high-end Fat Sharks models, which I really like. It also has a camera right here, so I can switch between FPV mode and seeing out the front, which is nice.
So you could just use those for life and not FPV.
Well, I'm going to be walking around like this forever now.
Clearly,
This
is how you want to live your reality.
Well, because it means I don't have to do this.
Yeah.
To fly, right?
I learned firsthand, as soon as you lose connection with your quad, you panic and you want to like throw your goggles up, but if your goggles are slipping all over your face, usually means you're going to crash.
Exactly. And now this is a little higher end than the handmade units that we were playing around with, but one of the other things that it does that I'm really excited to play with is it does head tracking. So as I move my head around, the little FPV camera will move with me. So I can look to the left, look to the right, up, down. Yeah.
I want to play with this now.
No.
I want to go outside right now and do this.
You cannot have it. No.
Oh, that is awesome.
Actually, yeah. Maybe that's why I put this on my budget. So maybe we could put your set on the know-how budget.
Thank you. We will do our best. I feel like we have to have this.
But stay tapped, because we're going to be bringing you plenty more of quadcopter action. We've also got a couple of interesting projects that are in the works.
We always have some interesting projects in the works. It's just whether or not they will kill people. Or
Exactly.
Yeah.
The FPV foam cutter is coming up. We're doing a bunch of stuff with FreeNAS. A lot of you have asked for media servers and for storage servers. we thought it was time for us to bring FreeNAS back because FreeNAS has updated a couple of their modules. Let's do another build and show you how it works. I've been wanting to do a lot of stuff with network video recorders. So I've got like 2 or 3 segments queued up right now. I've got another 2 that I want to get filmed. And we are starting, I think in 2 or 3 weeks, we're starting our official video station upgrade. So we're going to assume that you have a lower powered PC. We're going to tell you where your best bang for buck is if you want to use it for content creation.
SSD.
Spoiling what?
Just kidding.
Oh, actually, it's
I
probably
don't know, that's
true.
just my guess.
It's actually probably true. But folks, I know that this has been a lot of material, and so we want to give you all of this. We're going to be giving you the directions list, the parts list. We're going to be showing you where you can buy all the things that we've been playing with here in our show notes. And Brian, where do they find those show notes?
Well, at the revamped twit.tv/KH, might look a little different than what you might be used
Brian,
to.
you look very different in that picture.
Yeah, right? I don't know what happened. But anyway, that's where all our shows live. Clearly, we'll have show notes for this episode and places to subscribe. That was our Kamehameha. Yeah.
Absolutely. Also, don't forget that you can find us on Google+. Our Google+ group has almost 9,000 members of the community right now. It's a great place to go if you have questions, if you have projects. We pull all of our questions out of the Google+ group, and we also pull a lot of our parting shots. If you've got videos that you want to show off, including crashes or something that you built that you're really proud of, make sure to go to Google+ and just look for know-how. Join the community.
Show it off.
Show it off. Yeah.
That's not the only place they can find us. There's also Twitter if you want to figure out what we've been up to behind the scenes or what's coming up on next episodes and things like that. I am at cranky_hippo.
I am at PadreSJ, and our director, the
Al
man
Grumple.
with the button. What's his name? Al?
Excuse me, Brian. That's Gumple.
Oh, Gumple. I always get that
Grumple?
wrong.
Grumple?
Grumple.
Grumple.
Yeah.
Grumple.
Do you have a camera on yourself, sir?
Sure. And I'm still waiting for Padre to bring in the equipment for the know-how host cam. But until we do that, I'm going to be very angry, and we got to stop the show early.
Great. See, that's how it works here. Thanks
As long as
everyone.
I get to wear these goggles for
No.
it.
Thanks to everyone who makes this show possible. Of course, to Lisa and to Leo for letting us do this show here. To Al Grumple, our director. Wow.
What? You looked this cool when you were wearing them.
Well, then I look damn cool.
Yeah, right?
All right.
That's what I think.
We better end the show. Until next time, I'm Father Robert Ballecer.
I'm Bryan Burnett.
And now that you know how,
Go do it. Fly it.
give me back my
FPV
goggles.
it. These are nice.
Brian?
I want to turn them on. How do you turn them on?
Well, you put the battery in.
Oh, wait.